In addition, I have my company, Foundry. I'm in the process of starting another company, which I'm very excited about and is a big part of this workshop, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I do a lot of speaking, not just for EO, but I do a lot of speaking for Speaker Spotlight and National Speakers Bureau, so across North America in a big way. So this is kind of what we're going to work through in the workshop. Your internal identity, so who am I, the analysis piece. So your big, your differentiating factor, your current situation, your values and your mandatories, your key roles in life, and who's your tribe, who's your target audience. So that's completely understanding self. The second part is verbal identity. So where am I going? What's my strategy? And your purpose statement, your goal setting, and to-do lists, and your elevator speech, which is the pitch. And the third piece is your visual identity, and that's your marketing. How am I going to get there? And a lot of times people think about personal development and personal branding as being a bit egocentric. But it isn't. We are leaders, and we have to lead by example, and whether it's leading our kids or leading our staff, we have to show them that this is how it's done and this is how we do it. And so understanding yourself as a leader and what you're putting forward is pretty important. So just as an icebreaker, we're going to do a small little exercise. I want you to turn to the person next to you. You have 5 minutes each. I want you to talk about an opportunity, a fear, a wish, and a regret. 5 minutes each. And remember these at the end, because you are going to sign a contract. I need you to remember those 4 things because we're going to sign, well, you're going to sign a contract with yourself at the end of this. And you're going to figure out how to either capitalize on that opportunity, deal with that fear, make that wish a success, and figure out what you're going to do about your regrets. So as we go through this, I'm going to just start telling you my personal story. So 4 years ago, I had a life-changing moment which brought me to doing this workshop, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But before 4 years was 18 years ago, and this was me. So 18 years ago, I had just moved to Canada with my kids. And I didn't know anything about the Western culture. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anything about, I didn't even know what a balance sheet was. I was a stay-at-home mom, pretty happy and content in my life. I had no ambition beyond the 4 walls of my house. And Canada was a whole new country. I didn't know anybody. We moved to Canada because we wanted a better life for our kids. And so landing in Canada, that was where I was. Today, as Jay kind of walked you through this is where I am. And it's been an absolute learning curve that went straight up like this. And it's been an incredible journey. And I've loved every second of it. And I have learned so much about myself and the world around me. So where I started before 4 years ago and before 18 years ago was 1971 Uganda. And that's where I was born. So there was a very thriving Asian community in Uganda that was very successful. And they pretty much controlled the middle economy, all the small businesses. And Idi Amin had a dream. And his dream told him that, God in his dream told him that he needs to expel all the Asians from Africa and take Africa back for the Africans. And so he gave, in a very bloody siege, he gave all the Asians 3 days to leave the country. And my dad talks about heads on bayonets and bodies everywhere. And it was a siege that left about 500,000 people dead. And my family left with me, my father and my mother and my father's 14 brothers and sisters. that he was now responsible for. And we moved back to Yemen with $7 that my dad hid in his shoes. Now those days, $7 was a lot of money and could have taken him far. But we landed in Yemen as immigrants in a country that actually was ours. But we didn't know anything about that culture, that country. We didn't speak the language. We didn't know anything about it. And most of the Asians either went to England, came to Australia, went to Canada, but my father had had enough of other people's countries and he wanted to go home. So we landed in Uganda after all the Asians were expelled. And we learned a valuable lesson. So Yemen, this was right after the revolution when the Imam was overthrown. And before the revolution, people weren't allowed to have an education. You could only learn to read the Quran. And so my father had just graduated from Kampala University, from Makerere University in Kampala, with a master's in zoology. And landed in Yemen. He was one of 5 people, yes, 5 people in the entire country that had a university degree. And he was instantly appointed Minister of Planning to the government of Yemen. So and he didn't even speak Arabic. So that was an interesting learning curve. My mother is from India, and she started working for the American Embassy. So we were very lucky that way. We were able to get jobs. However, when we first landed, there was 19 of us, and we lived in 2 rooms. And our living room floor was also our bedroom floor, was also our dining room floor, three times a day when we put a plastic sheet down and had dinner. And that was our life for a few years until my family started working. My dad and mom put all my uncles and aunts through school. And I was very lucky because I got to go to the international school. My mother pulled a lot of strings and she got me a scholarship. But what was interesting about, which is why I don't have much of an accent, because all my teachers were the foreign community. But it was interesting for me then because I was the only scholarship student in that school. I was the only Yemeni student in that school, and I really didn't fit. This was a school of children of all the ambassadors and all the expatriate community, and then there was me. And I didn't fit that community. I hadn't traveled like them. I didn't know about the West. I'd never heard of baseball before, and it was a really interesting experience. And I tried really hard. I tried to fit in. And my father met my new Western behavior with disapproval, and I found myself in an all-girls Arabic school. So I was 11 years old, wearing a veil for the first time in my life. I didn't speak Arabic because at home we spoke English. And I was, yet again, the person that didn't fit in because everybody in the Arabic school thought I was that weird foreign girl. And so that was a big chunk of my childhood. I just found myself not wanting to be different. I wanted to be like everybody else. I changed my thoughts, I changed the way I dressed, I changed how I acted. I was ashamed of my family because they made me different. And all I wanted to do was fit into this little box that I had created. And it wasn't until many years later, when I moved to Canada and I started my marketing company, that I realized that what makes me different is what makes me interesting. And that was an interesting lesson because it changes your mindset completely. Instead of wanting to fit in, you now want to stand out. And that's what I do now. That's my business. I help companies like yours stand out. So shoes are optional. Take pride in who you are is kind of where I was. My one regret is that one day I seized my obstinate pursuit of my own individuality. And that is what I did. I resented my family. I resented my mother because she was from India. I resented the fact that we talked different and we acted different. And I realized many years later that the sacrifices that my parents made, the things that they did for us. My mother was the first professional working woman in the country. She was the first woman to drive in Yemen. And I didn't treat her very well when I was young because she was different. And my father worked his ass off to get us all, through his brothers and sisters through a better education. And I'm incredibly proud to be their daughter now, but then I wasn't. So, you know how you guys have BYOB parties, bring your own booze parties? My wedding was a bring your own goat party. So I was 17. My dad had always promised me that I would go abroad to study university. And I'm very stubborn, like my daughter, and I don't take no for an answer very well. And so it was an easy way for my dad to get me off his back. He told me, yeah, sure, you go to university until grade 11. And then he said, we don't have girls that travel abroad by themselves. And that was the carrot at the end of my stay. Totally crushed my childhood dreams. And so I decided to find another way. And I had several proposals, wedding proposals, people that I haven't met before, but that's how it's done in Yemen. His mother proposes to your mother, and weddings happen that way. And one of the guys was moving to the U.S., and so I said I will take him. And so I got married when I was 17 to a man that I really didn't know, and we had a really big wedding, and I got 4,000 votes for my wedding, along with my weight in gold and a dowry. So we ate, before you ask what we did with the goats, we ate them. We had 2,000 wedding guests for a week, and we ate the goats. So we moved to the States. Rolla, Redneck, Middle America, Missouri was where we landed, and for the first time I stripped off my veil, and I wore short shorts and belly shirts, and I smoked, and I went to rock concerts, and imagine this wide-eyed, innocent girl from Yemen at a Guns N' Roses concert in Kansas City, Missouri. That was a really interesting experience. But I did. I just, all of a sudden, the world was changing, and I could do anything I wanted. And I went to school, but I didn't go to university because I didn't think I was smart enough. I was always told that I didn't need a university degree. Girls were meant to stay home and have babies. And that's what I thought I was going to do. So I went to secretarial school, and I got a degree in 6 months. And I had my daughter. And then moved to Dallas, Texas, and I had my other daughter. And Dallas was an interesting experience for me. So in Dallas, they have a grocery store called Piggly Wiggly. And these are pre-debit card days. So when you bought groceries, you wrote them a check, and then you handed over your driver's license, and they took your driver's license and wrote your number at the back of the check. In case the check bounced, they knew how to find you. And I always hated handing over my driver's license because, so I had a belly up to here, and I had a child on one hip, and I had a big red minor stamped across my driver's license. And I didn't get treated very well. Dallas has a lot of Mexicans. They didn't treat me very well because I didn't speak Spanish, and they thought I was, Mexican. And the other people didn't treat me well because they thought I was Mexican. And so again, I didn't fit. And but it was an interesting experience trying to understand the culture, trying to understand myself, trying to understand my world. I was a mom for the first time. I was 19 when I had my oldest. I was 20 when I had my second one. I didn't know what to do with these babies. I was going through a bit of a depression because I couldn't understand what was wrong with me. What did I want? And why was I not content with this life that I have, which was a pretty good one. And then we moved back to Yemen, and I have a little video. I just thought this was pretty cute. It's I'm in advertising. We like ads, but shit does happen. Oh, there's no volume. Okay, well, there's no volume, but you'll get it.
Is this how you watch it at home?
Shit does happen. So we moved back to Yemen. And it was another culture shock for me because now I lived in the West. I had 2 babies in these great clean hospitals, and I moved back to Yemen. And all of a sudden I was back in a society where I had no value as a person and as a member of society. And that was pretty tough. And now I had 2 children. And the education system it's a third world country. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. The education system is not great. The medical system is not great. And we had a lot of medical issues. In my time in Yemen, we had 3 emergency flights to Germany because of medical issues. And I was depressed again. And again, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then civil war happened. So between my house and the president's house is this big paved road. And Sana'a is a city of mostly unpaved roads. And one morning at 5 a.m., I discovered why there was this nice big paved road between the president's house and mine. It was a road built for tanks, and about 50 tanks rolled by. And then emergency air fighter jets started taking off. And every window in my house shattered. And the airports shut down. We couldn't leave the country. And we were at war with the South. So I could have left if I wanted to, because both my daughters were American. And the American embassy was evacuating their people. But I was 22 years old. Where was I going to go? I didn't know anything anywhere else in the world. And how long was the Civil War going to last? And how was I going to support myself? And what was going to happen to my family? My parents couldn't leave, my husband couldn't leave. And so we decided to stay. And it's really interesting now when I talk about it, and we talk about the bombs came every night. And we had no electricity, we had no running water. And we would get up in the morning and start phoning people to find out who got hit. And when I talk about it now, it sounds like, we were at war. And it sounds like an incredible story. But when you're there, when you're in the middle of it, life just goes on. No, one day is not any different than the next. And you just live your life, and nothing changes, and you get used to it. So after that, during the Civil War, I got pregnant with my son, and I had him in Yemen. I had had 2 babies in the U.S. I had really easy childbirths in the U.S. They kind of just popped out and they were there. And so I'm like, not a big deal. People have babies in Yemen all the time. I can do the same. And I realized that was not quite the case. Anything that could go wrong did. I had major complications, so did my son. There was no electricity in the hospital. There was no medication. Every time they needed something, the doctor wrote a prescription, and my husband would run around to different pharmacies trying to find the medication, and if he found it, trying to make sure that it wasn't expired. And it was an interesting experience. My mother-in-law said to me, "Do not get on the bed." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Just wait until I get there." She had boiled some sheets and wrapped them in plastic. She was going to bring clean sheets with her. And I'm like, "Really?" So I get to the hospital, and the cleaning lady shows me that the sheets are clean. And this is a filthy floor. The sheets have brown stains on them. They have holes in them. There's this pussy-eyed cat that kept coming in and out of the room. And it was the filthiest hospital you can imagine, and this was a private hospital. So lots of complications. I had lots of problems, and they needed to put me to sleep in order to have emergency surgery. They couldn't find the anesthesiologist. He didn't have a phone. Sana'a doesn't have any road signs, so they had to give my husband directions to go to his house at 1 in the morning, and he had to bribe him with $1,000 in order to come to the hospital at night. Meanwhile, I'm hemorrhaging the whole time, and I'm refusing to let any of the doctors touch me because I'm like, "You put me to sleep and do whatever the hell you want." Anesthesiologist came, put me to sleep. I didn't wake up for 3 days. They couldn't wake me up, and they were really worried. And when I woke up, I said to my mom and my ex-husband, I said, "My arm really hurts." And they're like, "Your arm really hurts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my arm really hurts." So 3 days, I'm lying in this hospital for 3 days. Not one person noticed this. Not the doctors, nurses, my parents. But I had, because I had the IV, I had complications. I had thrombosis in my arm. So my entire arm had swelled up to about 4 times the size of this. And all the blood had hardened in my veins. So my arm was black. And nobody noticed. Probably because I was still wearing my full veil, but so that night I was on an emergency flight with my son to Germany, both of us raging with infections, and we're both good now. My son is 18, he's in his 2nd year of university, and we decided to move to Canada because we wanted a better life for our children. And even though we were among the privileged few in Yemen, my ex-husband, which is why we had such a big wedding, my husband's, he was the grandson of the president, the former president of the country. And so we were among the privileged few in Yemen. We lived a different life. But that doesn't mean anything. In Yemen, if you have $2 million a month, or you have $200 a month, or you have $2 a day, which is poverty line, you live the same life. You're in the same environment. You don't get that much differences. So we decided to move to Canada, and we immigrated. And we landed in Canada, and I realized that my kids were changing so fast. They were changing in front of my eyes. They were becoming Canadian, and they were fitting in. And I was being left behind. And I was very scared. I didn't even want to go volunteer at the school because I felt like I might say something wrong, or I might do something wrong, or I might embarrass them. And it was a really interesting experience being there, watching these kids change and grow. And I said to my husband one day, I said, I'm really bored. I'm going out of my mind in this house. I don't know what to do. He was working in a different town. He only came home on weekends. And he said to me, not unkindly, but he said, who's going to hire you? And he was right. Who was going to hire me? But I got really pissed off at him. And I went to the mall for an afternoon of retail therapy. And I came home with a job at Danier Leather at the mall. And I was really excited because this was something that was mine, apart from the family. And I made more commission in my part-time job than anybody in Alberta while I worked there, because I instinctively understood how to talk to people, how to sell something. I didn't understand psychographics, but I didn't know what it meant, but I understood them. And I knew how to close a sale. And I was very excited by that. And all of a sudden, there was this new fire and this new passion. And so I decided to go back to school, and I went to ACAD because I was trying to figure out what to do. I thought I could draw. Jonathan out there will tell you that I didn't know how to draw. Jonathan and I went to school together, and he works here now. So he's our cameraman today. So I thought I knew how to draw, and I thought I'd go to ACAD and just, try and figure out what I want to do, what university degree I want to get, and I was just passing time. And I went to ACAD, and I realized that I did not know how to draw. My slides are on the walls with this cold and jet lag. I missed a couple of pieces that I did want to tell you about, and that was the power of EO. So I was reading this article this morning at 2 a.m. as I was lying in bed, wide awake with jet lag, and it had a really interesting. Sorry?
Like the air conditioner to take off.
Exactly. It had a really interesting stat about the power of sharing. And it said, according to recent studies, 76% of us succeed at our goals if we tell our friends, as opposed to 46% of us who just write them down, as opposed to even less of us who don't write them down. So I thought that was a really interesting stat about telling your friends your goals. And it's a big part of EO. And EO has changed my world in so many ways. I don't think I would be anywhere today without the power of EO. And I'll tell you a quick story about getting a divorce in EO. So in my forum group, Hannes is Austrian. So I don't know if you know a lot of Austrian people, but black and white. There's no in between. He says it like it is, and he just doesn't care what you think. So he was my coach for my presentation. It was my third presentation with EO, and I was doing a business presentation. And halfway through the presentation, halfway through our coaching session, Hannes does this with his pen, and he's like, "You are full of shit." I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "You don't share. You come in with your pretty little updates every month. You don't tell us what's really going on with you. You don't get any value from us. You don't give us any value back. You just don't share. Why are you even in this forum group? I don't want to be your coach anymore." And he laughed. And I was really mad at him. And I called him a few choice words. And then I went home and I cried. And then I wrote a presentation, and it came straight from my heart. And I didn't censor anything. I didn't clean it up. I just wrote it down. And I went in front of my forum group, and for the first time in my life, because that's not our culture. Our culture is you don't air your dirty laundry. Like, my kids didn't know anything about my life with my ex. My parents didn't know. But I stood up for the first time and I said, I am really unhappy. And I hadn't said that before. And it was one of the most powerful things I had done, because at the end of the day, it didn't even matter as much what they gave back to me, and their feedback was phenomenal. But it wasn't even that. It was me being able to stand up and articulate and say, this is what's going on with me. And now I was accountable, not just to them, but I was accountable to myself, because I put it out there and I needed to deal with it. And it took me 9 months, but I left 9 months later. And my forum group was a huge part of my support system. And my ex-husband completely blames them. But that was my EO story. And the other thing that I didn't go into is when I talked about how upset my kids were with me, and especially my oldest daughter. I would call her every day, and I would tell her how much I love her, and she would hang up on me. And I'd call her the next day, and I'd ask her how her day went, and I'd tell her I love her, and she would hang up on me. And it happened for 5 months. And we had this huge blow up one day. She was going to the doctor. She had some stomach issues, and so she was a little scared. And she wanted me to come with her, but she didn't really want to talk to me. She just wanted me to come with her. And so we were in the doctor's office, and she was being absolutely terrible, like terrible. And I was a pretty strict parent. I didn't put up with disrespect. But she was being terrible, and so I left. Before we even went in to see the doctor, and she came out an hour later, and she called me, and she said, "Did you just walk out of there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And she sat in her car over there, and I sat in my car over here, and we talked for about an hour and a half, and both of us cried and cried and cried, but we dealt with it, and we got it out, and I understood what was going on with her. She was afraid for me. But it wasn't only for me. She was afraid that I'd be alone. And she was afraid that I would regret this. But it wasn't only for me. She was not in a good relationship. And she was afraid for herself, and she was projecting a little bit. And she left that boyfriend, and she thanked me for it. And said that, "Thank you for giving me the courage to be able to take that step." And she lives with me now. She's an absolute pain. She's messy as hell. But she's in her 4th year of oil and gas engineering. And she's a phenomenal kid. She acts like she's my mother all the time. And then the other thing is, one of the really good things that came out of this whole new program is when I was talking about the sky is not the limit. Whatever you want from life, you will get. You just need to want it badly enough, and you just need to do it. And that's what I learned, and put it out there. So one of the things I did do when I decided I wanted to build this online coaching program is I went out and found the business partners that I needed and that are absolutely amazing. But not only that, EO again stepped up to the plate, and I have a few friends in EO Global because of all the universities and stuff, and through Athens, in Athens at the GLC, and in Panama, and in Buenos Aires, and a few other places. I've been talking to them about this program. And so when I was in Buenos Aires, Jeff Rovelli is from the Holland chapter. And I've met him a few times in Istanbul and in Bahrain and a few other places. And he said to me one day in Buenos Aires, he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And he said, "Something's up with you. Come and sit down here and tell me what's going on." And so I sat down and I talked to him, and I said, "I just feel a little lost. I don't love my business anymore. I don't love advertising and branding. It feels empty. We sell shit. And it doesn't excite me. And it's not what I want to do. It's not the legacy that I want to leave behind. And I want to start this other thing. I don't have time. I'm busy, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this." And we had this absolutely phenomenal conversation. And we kind of both went our separate ways and went home. And then a week later, I got an email from Jeff that was titled Black Hole. And in the email, he said, "Look, I want your permission to send you some questions. You can answer them or not. You can share with me or not. I'm here, absolutely here for you if you need to talk. But you don't have to. But just look at the questions and answer them. Is that okay? Do I have your permission to send you those questions?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." And for 2 months, every single day I got a question from Jeff. And they were all titled Black Hole, and they were phenomenal questions. And there was days when all I wanted to do was say, "Fuck you for making me think about this," because I don't want to. But I did. I dealt with it. I looked at it. A couple of times I shared with them. Mostly I didn't. But it was the best thing I'd ever done. And that was in December of last year. November. That was in November of last year. And since then, I've got all my funding for the new company. All of my financing is coming from EO members from around the world, and these are people that I've talked to about the program. And the very first question that comes out of their mouth is, how can I help? And they make things happen. And so EO is a really powerful group that way. But I also, a month ago, as Sharon just asked me, a month ago I signed a book deal with HarperCollins. And I'm really excited about this, so I'm writing a business book. So it's called Reset. Working title right now is Reset. All right, so I'm going to go through some of these. So unfortunately, we have a couple of these sheets didn't get printed properly, and it's partly my fault because I sent over a PDF. So instead of each of these pages being a single page, there are 2 per page. So we have some bigger ones here that you can work through. But we're going to do some of this stuff. We're going to do some of this dig. And I actually, Marilyn Monroe has some of the best quotes ever, surprisingly. But she has some really good ones. And this is who I am. This is the big dig, and it's understanding yourself. And you cannot change who you are. This is something I've learned. People can try, and they can try to pretend who they think they should be. But everybody will see through that. At some point, there will be a crack, and people will see that. So you need to be yourself. You need to figure out first who yourself is, and you need to be yourself. You can fix it, clean it up, refine it, make it better, make it stronger, educate yourself, all of those things. But you can't change who you are. You can just make yourself better. So that's partly this big dig, is understanding who we are and what we want from life. We're all affected by environmental factors, we're affected by economic factors, we're affected by other people around us, other situations, other things that might change our path and our direction. But what I learned is it's always good to get that check-in, that reset. Is this really what I wanted? Is this the life that I wanted to live? Because before you know it, my kids are all in university now. And they grow up so fast. And I know that I will blink one day and I will open my eyes and I'll be 80 years old. And what stories am I going to give that 80-year-old that has now given me this able body and mind to live this life? What stories am I going to give her to tell when she's 80? So that was really important to me, is understanding how to get clear on what I want and to be able to have those memories that I want. And so one of the things I did when I wrote my personal brief, when I left 4 years ago, I realized there's a lot of things in my life that I hadn't done. And we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. I realized that at 40, with 3 kids and my own company, I had never been on a date in my life. Because I was married when I was 17 in an arranged marriage. And so try going on a date at that age with 3 kids. It's an interesting experience. But there's so many other things I hadn't done before. I'd never got cable by myself. I'd never bought my own car that was in my name. I had never taken my kids on a holiday that I had paid for. And there was a lot of things that I was doing for the first time. And that kind of excited me in a big way. And I decided that I was going to spend the rest of my life collecting experiences. And I have. I collected so many. I learned how to ride a motorcycle. I learned how to ski last year. I learned how to jet ski. I learned how to wake surf. I learned how to do lots of things. I'm learning how to speak French. I speak 5 languages, but they're all useless. I'm not in English. So,
Sorry, I have to shoot you guys.
my what story?
Your guys.
Oh my God. My first date story? I should have told you that one.
Shouldn't tell me anything.
So, soon after my divorce, very soon after my divorce, I'd gone to a party, and I met this guy who a bunch of people were talking, and he had said something, and I responded, and then I said, "Hi, I'm Zahra." And he said, "You were top 40 under 40." And I said, "How do you even know that? That was 2 years ago. Like, how do you remember that?" And he didn't say anything, he just smiled. And he invited me to his office for lunch the next day. He has a chef, in his office that makes food for all his staff, and he wanted to talk about Foundry, my company. And so I thought it was a business lunch, and I said yes. And then he texted me and he said, emailed me, and he said, you know, it's going to be really tight. Lunch is going to be really tight. Why don't you come for dinner instead? And we'll have more time to talk. So I said, yeah, sure. And then he said, oh, and I didn't know who he was. And then he said, oh, I'm going to be on the radio tomorrow morning. You know, if you want to listen. And you realize that I didn't know who he was. And so I'm listening to the radio as I'm driving my son to school, and the DJ announcer, what do you call the radio personality, says, it's Valentine's Day and we have Brett Wilson in the house. And I'm like, oh shit, he's Brett Wilson. So Brett Wilson is Canada's billionaire philanthropist. He's a dragon on Dragon's Den. I'm like, oh shit, he's Brett Wilson. And oh no, it's Valentine's Day. So I texted him and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to have dinner with you tonight. It's Valentine's Day. It was right after my divorce. My kids were still really angry. I was still in the house. My ex was living the last 9 years of our marriage. He lived in Yemen. So I didn't realize that this man has his phone with him at all times. So the announcer says, so what are you doing tonight? And he said, well, I have a date with a really beautiful woman. Oh wait, she just dumped me. And then he starts describing me. And so I texted him and I'm like, please stop. Don't do that. And he's like, well, have dinner with me. And so I did. That lasted for 11 months. Great guy. He was, like I said last night, he wasn't my Mr. Right, but he was my Mr. Right now. And he really helped me through a lot of stuff. So anyways, that was my first dating story. So this is the big thing. This is understanding who you are and what you want. And one of the things I realized is, and I talked about this a little bit, but it's really hard to be honest with yourself, but you have to be. You have to understand what you want. You have to understand what your shortcomings are, what your barriers to entry are, what is stopping you from getting to where you want, because you can't deal with those things until you understand what they are, and your personal traits are a big part of that. And so it's kind of the sticky part, and you don't want to deal with it when you're a crisis mode like me. You want to deal with it all the time. And so one of the things that I did is I thought about happiness. And all of us want to be happy. We talk about it all the time. Every week another book comes out and is like the pursuit of happiness or the happiness project, and everybody's looking for this thing called happy. And what does it mean? Happiness is not a goal, and it's not an objective, and it's not even an emotion. Happiness is achieving what you want and getting to that goal. It's the journey that's going to get you there. And so understanding what that is, what is going to make you happy, what do you want from life if you close your eyes and you open them, and it's 10 years forward now. Where are you, and what are you doing, and what does that look like? And also knowing that that might change, because there was a time when my company was everything to me. And I was so passionate about marketing and design, and I entered every award show, and Jonathan and I have worked together, and we've won some of the biggest international design awards in the world. I don't even enter award shows anymore because I don't care. And that's the problem. So that's what we don't realize as people, and I didn't think about it, is what my goals and objectives are can change. And that's okay if they change, if your passion changes. It doesn't have to be the same thing. Marriage is the same way. I said to my ex-husband a long time ago, he did not appreciate this at all. But I said, marriages should come with expiry dates. With an option for renewal, right? If you renew it because you want to, not because you're stuck in this situation now that you decided to make when you were 17. And if you decide to renew it, then you're going to treat it with respect, and you're going to treat it with passion, and you're going to give it your all. So you didn't think that was a good idea. But what I learned is it's not will I do it, it's can I do it, and yes you can. So that's what you need to do. And minutes roll into hours, roll into weeks, roll into months, roll into decades, and before you know it, it's over. Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I absolutely love that quote because it's true. So we're going to start with a who are you exercise. This is in your books there. And this one, really, you need to take home afterwards and get other people in your life to do it with you. And it is on page 4. So you need to do this for yourself, but then get the people close to you. And if they won't be totally honest, if they won't say the not so good things, then make it anonymous. Give them an option to do it. Do a survey monkey, I don't know. But give them an option to do it and not tell you who they are. But what this is about is circle the words that you think best describe you. And if they're not on this list, then write them down at the bottom. What do you think best describes you as a person? I can tell you I'm stubborn and I'm opinionated. And I like to do things a certain way. And it is a shortcoming at times. But find those words, be honest, be truthful, understand who you are as a person, what your personal traits are, why you do the things that you do, what your shortcomings are maybe, but what are the words that describe you best. And circle a dozen of these. And a dozen is a good number because you can't stop at 5. You need to find a dozen words because it gives you a well-rounded picture. And write down some if they're not there. And then take this and try it again with people that are important to you. Family, friends, get them to give you the feedback. And like I said, if they won't be honest, make it anonymous. Afterwards, take those words, put them together and look at them. What does this say about you? What picture does it paint? So for me, one of the things when I first started Foundry, I didn't have a voice for so long. For so long, I was just restricted in what I did. That when I finally had a voice, I knew, when I started Foundry, I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly how I wanted to do it. And I wanted everybody else to just step out of my way. Just let me go. And my business partner at the time, I've since bought her out, she's retired, said to me, she said, this is after she told me that I had about as much subtlety as her developments in a China shop. She said, use that quick brain of yours to stop ideas. Like sometimes, most of the time, you're right about the concept. But you need to give your team a chance to express themselves. You need to give them a chance to present to you and tell you what they think and maybe sell you on the idea. They're not going to grow otherwise. And I kind of rolled my eyes and I said, she wanted us to do the Enneagram personality test. If you haven't done this, it's really good. I do it with all my staff. But Enneagram is a little different than the DISC profile and all of that. It's a bit more spiritual. It's a bit digs deeper into feelings and emotions. And so we did the Enneagram test, and it said my high side is positive, and there was a lot of really good words. It was a big picture thinker, witty, funny, inspiring. Like there was some good words there. And then there was the low side, and the low side was demanding and opinionated and hedonistic. Like what does that mean? And intellectually promiscuous. And there's a whole bunch of other words that I didn't quite like. But I realized that was true about me. I just, full steam ahead, that was my 2 speeds. Full steam ahead. And I railroaded everybody around me and I didn't give them a chance. And so now in meetings, sometimes I have to sit on my hands and stop myself from talking. Because I need to let them, even though I know that that's not going to work because the client, whatever the reason is, I need to let them finish their explanation. I need to let them go through it. I need to let them work it out. I need to ask lots of questions. I need to not tell them what to do. And I realized that passion will build a company. Willpower will build a company, but it takes people, patience, and process to keep it thriving. And those were the things that I was neglecting. So it was really good learning for me to understand my words and deal with them. So I'll give you a few minutes to go through this.